In 1872, Chenzinger walked through the ominous stone gate, her hand bound, clutching a small counting stone. The spectators knew what awaited her, 300 bamboo strikes. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. After hundreds of blows, she would remain alive, and an entire crowd, hardened by decades of public executions, would beg the magistrates for mercy. Before we go further, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a strong comment below. Your support ensures that stories like this, the darkest truths of history, actually reach people. Picture China in the 1850s. The Qing dynasty is crumbling under the weight of opium, rebellion, and economic collapse. Local magistrates wield almost unlimited power in their districts. Across Hubei province, they install something chilling. Discipline gates, massive stone archways placed outside courthouses, designed not as mere entrances, but as public theaters of punishment. Every passerby would witness the consequences of defiance, every act of cruelty recorded in the collective memory. For men, the punishment was swift. Beheading, exile, or imprisonment, definitive and final. But for women, the system was mercilessly sadistic. These gates became the execution ground for what officials labeled immoral women, those accused of adultery, disobedience, theft, or even minor slights. And the sentence was always the same: public beating with bamboo rods until the magistrate decided the lesson was learned, or until the woman died. Here's where it gets horrifying. There were 3 categories of women brought to the gate, and only one had any real legal justification. Category 1, actual criminals. Women guilty of theft, murder, or arson, cases backed by evidence and formal trials. They accounted for roughly 40% of the gate's victims. Category 2, family discipline. Fathers accused daughters of disobedience. Husbands reported wives for speaking against their mother-in-law. Mothers-in-law implicated daughters-in-law for insolence. No trial, no evidence. Just a man's word. This category made up 35% of cases. Category 3, debt collateral. Families unable to pay debts to wealthy landowners literally handed over daughters to take the punishment. This was 25% of cases. Entirely innocent yet condemned to suffer. The records are chilling. In some years, the family discipline cases outnumbered actual criminal convictions 3-1. Hundreds of women, perhaps thousands, punished not for crimes, but simply for being vulnerable under patriarchal authority. Now, let's talk about how the punishment was executed, because it was designed to maximize agony. The woman was stripped to the waist, chained to a wooden post. Executioners wielded bamboo rods, roughly 4 feet long, 1 inch thick, soaked in salt water to increase weight and flexibility. Strikes were meticulously targeted: the back, the buttocks, and the backs of the thighs. Never the head, never the spine directly, never anywhere that would kill quickly. The goal was not death. It was slow, relentless, public suffering. 20 strikes split the skin. 50 strikes tore into the muscle. 100 strikes felt like every nerve in the body was aflame. Most women lost consciousness between 60 and 80 blows. The lucky ones never woke. But in 1872, Chenzinger arrived carrying something unprecedented, a small counting stone. And she had a plan that would expose the system's cruelty, forcing even hardened spectators to revolt. At just 24 years old, she had defied the local magistrate by refusing to marry a wealthy landlord's son, a match arranged without her consent. The landlord, enraged by her refusal, bribed officials to ensure her punishment at the gate. What happened next would shock everyone and ignite the deadliest 6 months in this gate's blood-soaked history. The sentence was clear: 100 strikes, the standard punishment for female disobedience. But Chenzinger did something that no one had ever seen before. As the executioner raised the bamboo rod for the first blow, she started counting out loud. 1. The rod fell, splitting her back. 2. Another strike, blood running down her spine. You have to understand, condemned women never spoke during punishment. They screamed, begged, went silent. But Chenzinger's voice remained steady. clear, turning each strike into an accounting. Each number a spotlight on the crowd, witnessing her suffering. We know these details because a British Baptist missionary, Reverend Thomas Wilson, was in attendance. His diary, dated August 15, 1872, calls her the counting woman who shamed an entire town into rebellion. The crowd starts shifting uncomfortably. Eyes dart away. Step 3. Women begin to cry. Men avoid eye contact. 89. Her voice weakens, but still she counts. The magistrate glares, furious, nodding the executioner to continue. By the time she reached 142, she had endured 42 strikes beyond her official sentence. But Chenzinger didn't break. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. By 2:12, the crowd could no longer stay silent. Shouts erupted, "Enough! She has suffered enough! Stop!" By 2:68, people pushed toward the gate. Guards formed a line, but the crowd refused to yield. Then came the decisive moment. The spectators surrounded the post, forming a human barrier between Chenzinger and the executioner. Women sobbed openly. Men shouted at the magistrate. Chaos consumed the square. Here's the cruel irony. A legal loophole existed. If divine intervention or public sympathy stopped a punishment before the magistrate officially ended it, the sentence was legally considered served. Chenzinger somehow knew about this loophole. The magistrate had no choice. He declared the sentence complete. Chenzinger survived, barely. She spent 6 months recovering, but she lived. You'd think this was a triumph of humanity, right? The moment when public conscience pushed back against systemic cruelty. But the story takes a darker turn. Within 6 months, the number of women beaten at the gate tripled. In 1873 alone, 89 women died. Why? The magistrates misinterpreted the lesson. Chenzinger's survival didn't signal we are too cruel. They thought, we are too slow. The Hubert Provincial Archives tell the story. 71, 23 women died at the gate. 72. Chenzinger's year, 31 deaths. 1873, 89 deaths, a 287% increase. The method changed. New directives demanded completion within 50 strikes, faster, harder, leaving no time for spectators to sympathize. Women who might have survived 100 strikes now died after 50 blows delivered in 8 minutes. Brutality didn't decrease, it accelerated, and then, something the Qing dynasty didn't anticipate, photography. In April 1873, Wilhelm Berger, a Western photographer, documented an execution at the gate. He captured a woman chained mid-strike, blood pooling at her feet, hundreds watching like it's a festival. The photograph spread. Newspapers in Shanghai, then Hong Kong, Europe. Diplomatic questions arose. Is this what Chinese justice looks like? Missionaries used it in fundraising campaigns. American papers ran it under Oriental barbarism exposed. The image reached one person with the power to shut down the gates. Emperor Guangxu. But here's the shocking part. His reason had nothing to do with mercy or justice. It was pure political calculation. Emperor Guangxu wasn't angry about the cruelty. He was worried about optics. China was in crisis. Opium wars had drained the treasury, foreign powers controlled key ports, and the empire teetered on collapse. Guangxu knew modernization was the only way to survive. He needed trade, railways, technology. But how could he negotiate as an equal if newspapers in London and Paris showed women being beaten to death in public squares? So in 1902, Guangxu issued an edict. All discipline gates must close. Public corporal punishment of women was officially banned. The decree was framed as reform, as modernization, but it wasn't justice, it was rebranding. Yet the gates didn't just vanish. They became symbols. In the 1910s and 1920s, early Chinese feminists adopted the image of the gate as a representation of patriarchal violence, publishing essays like Breaking Through the Gate and Beyond the Stone Archway. What was once an execution site became a metaphor for systemic oppression. Fast forward to 1949. The Communist Party takes power, demolishing relics of imperial China to rewrite history. The Humiliate Gate, now in ruins, was destroyed, but that's when something incredible was discovered. Carved into the stone foundation, faint from decades of weathering, were 127 names, etched by women using fingernails, broken pottery, whatever they could find in their final moments. Chenzinger's name was among them. Others were women whose only crimes had been speaking loudly, laughing in public, or refusing an arranged marriage. The discovery was immediately classified. Why? It didn't fit the narrative. The Communist Party wanted to portray itself as liberating women, but these names proved the gates were still operating decades after the 1902 ban. The local officials had simply ignored it. The names stayed secret until 1987, when a teacher, Li Mingju, published them in a regional history journal. She was reprimanded, but finally, these women's names were public. Today, a small memorial plaque lists all 127 names. For most, this is the only record that they ever existed. Between 1850 and 1902, just 52 years, historians estimate that 2,000 to 3,000 women died at this single gate. Not across China, not across provinces. At this one gate, in this one town. Let that sink in. This isn't distant history. This is 5 generations ago. Your great-great-grandmother might have been alive when this gate was still operating. Chenzinger's act of defiance, her counting method, her refusal to suffer silently, spread to other provinces. Women in Hunan and Jiangxi began counting. Their strikes allowed, sometimes bringing witnesses to verify the numbers. They turned their torture into testimony. It didn't save most of them, but it changed what their deaths meant. They were no longer just victims, they were resistors. Today, the gate is just an empty courtyard in a busy city. Children play where women once screamed. Couples take photos. Few know what happened there unless they read the memorial plaque, but the 127 names remain, carved in stone, waiting to be remembered. Here's my question for you. If you could add one name to that memorial, whose forgotten story from history would you carve in stone? Not a famous figure, but someone whose courage deserves to be remembered forever. Leave your answer in the comments. And if this video made you think differently about history's forgotten voices, subscribe, because next week, we're investigating the Bridge of Sighs in Venice, where prisoners got one last view of the world before disappearing into cells they'd never leave. The truth about who built it and why is nothing like the romantic story tourists are told. I'll see you there.